Broken people create a broken world. We all know this to be true to a certain extent, and so many people that are watching out what goes on in this world, what's been happening for the last 5, 10, 15, 20 years. Well, first of all, they see all the same things repeating themselves over and over and over again. In fact, history is repeating itself all the time. But not just that, it's getting worse. Right? Every small repetition that we have seen in the last couple of years, it just kind of seems to be getting worse. What is going on there? And in today's episode, we're going to have a look at these mechanisms, why things are getting worse, why we perceive them as worse, or maybe also why we don't perceive them as too bad, and how we can escape that spiraling down and actually have a life full with freedom and solace. Okay, before we dive into that, let me introduce myself. I am Nenad Leonart. I'm your host of this Exaltify Me podcast, where we look at what moves us as humans, what are kind of the psychotrauma, depth psychology, all these things that people kind of talk about, but not really. I've been scrolling over social media. I've been looking over books that have been published lately, and there is one single thing that most of them have in common, and it's written for the general population, not necessarily telling them what is the right thing to do, but telling them the thing that they think they would love to do. So it's actually just for sales. Believe it or not, look at what people are trying to tell, look at all the mechanisms and how they pull you into the next stage, and you will go and just realize what is actually going on here. I'm not saying that they don't want to help you, and I believe that there are several stages of where we are, right? There's different places in life, and something works for you, something works for you 5 years ago, and something will work for you in 10 years. And we change. We're prone to change, and we're prone to, have a different opinion about the things that we like. For me, it was just very interesting to see how superficial and kind of quick fix type everything out there is. Or sometimes people will just say, well, we have this and this problem, but they will never really tell you how to solve it. So in this podcast, we try to go the different way. We try to look exactly at the cause of the things that are running us. And we're not trying to, kind of make it sound nicer or to kind of sugarcoat it so you can sleep easier at night. We're going for the real deal here, okay? And I think if you stuck around long enough till you're here, you know that. So let's talk about how broken people create a broken world. Right? If we look at the political movements that have been going on in the last maybe 20-ish years, a lot of them are saying, well, we need to save the planet. The climate is changing. We need to put really hardcore measures and then change everything. And this started out, and then there were people disputing that, right? And then you kind of got to have two sides, right? On one side, you had like scientists and some academics, and they were blaming everybody else. Well, not everybody else, but like the ruling elite and also the majority of the population for polluting the planet. While this other half, they were kind of just saying, no, everything's a hoax, everything's a made up. You just want to have something to control us. You just want to put in countermeasures, you want to cripple our freedom, and so on. And so you have this war going on, and on one side, people say we have to save the world, we have to save everybody, so we need more control. And on the other side, People say nobody needs to be saved, everything is fine, and you just want to take control and you just want to have power, and we don't want to give you that power. I'm not even going to go into if what climate change is like correct or incorrect, or who is right and who is wrong. I just want to look at this from a very, very, very human perspective, from a behavioral perspective. One side says this, the other side says this, and they're fighting, and they're not necessarily fighting about the thing itself. This is what took me years to understand. When people get into arguments, when people get into fights, when we have political debates, it's never about that thing. It's 90% just about who has more power, who has better arguments, who is better prepared, who has more authority, and so on. And so debates, argumentations, all of that stuff, that is just happening on like another level. And it has nothing to do with the actual thing that's been going on. This is the first thing that we need to understand. And again, going back to the promise, well, why do you say broken people create a broken world? Do you say the world is broken? Well, let's argue that the world, in fact, is broken because of so many injustices going on, so much instability, so much like the richer are getting richer and the poor are getting poorer, and it's just been crazy. Especially since the pandemic, you can see people always taking up different sides and always fighting with each other. It started with political correctness, and then people start telling each other what's the right thing, what's the wrong thing. They get into ethics, into morals, and we're kind of really very argumentative as a society right now. So, last time, broken people create a broken world means that whatever we create outside, whatever we make, that started from within. If you hear that and go like, that is really logical, we need to understand the implication. If we have a world that's fighting with itself all the time, that's struggling for power, that doesn't know which direction to take, that everybody wins a bit more and the other side wins a bit more, that's a manifestation of inner processes. Yay! I'm actually preparing a speech right now for next week, or in 2 weeks, I think it is, at the University of Zurich, where I will be talking during the Sustainability Week. And we're creating a workshop for people to come and to really be able to start changing, right? The Sustainability Week is where everybody goes like, well, you know, we have climate change, we are living unsustainably, the world is going to go to shits, everything is just going to get worse. What kind of world are we going to live to our children? And everybody's always focused on the outside. Now, there have been some really, really weird news stories, news articles, right? Like the people who are going into this politics, we should be flying less, we should be driving less cars, and so on. They kind of caught one of these activists at the airport who was flying to Mexico for pleasure. So the premise is they are telling everybody that they shouldn't do it, but they themselves then are exempt, and then they fly wherever they go. And what they do, basically whatever they want. So I'm not talking about this, right? This also just creates more arguments. I'm talking about people feeling, right? They are feeling, so that's inside. They're feeling an emotion of this is unjust, this is going not well, it's in fact becoming worse and worse and worse. Please do something. You need to do something, right? It's most of the time it's you politicians, you ruling class, you other people, you need to do something. if they really would scrutinize themselves and just look at how they are living their life, maybe they would have to say goodbye to one or two more things which are, let's say, a luxury. But the psychological effect of saying, I have this internal feeling that something is wrong, and then I project it onto the outside, so the outside is wrong, and somebody from the outside, please come and fix this for me. Guess what? They're not going to go and do that. And what is happening here, like that whole behavioral thing, it's people reverting to childlike behavior. Because when we were kids and we had parents, something from the outside threatened us, something was weird, something was wrong, we would go like, oh, I'm scared, or I have bad feelings about this. Mommy, Daddy, please help. Please fix the situation for me. And now we have like the same thing going on in our society, where people get to be elected officials, they are supposed to run a country and so on, and then you have a ton of people going like, Mommy, Daddy, please fix my issues. You could say, well, that's their job, right? They are politicians for a reason. However, I would argue that most issues would be fixed if we as humans inherently started with ourselves and then went to the next level, like to the next instance, if something would not be able to be fixed. You see where I'm going with this? If everybody would just take care of their own business to prevent, let's say, climate change, there would be much less expectations onto the politicians to prevent this. And that's self-reliance, that's responsibility, it's taking responsibility for one's own actions. And also going into activism in a good kind, not like telling everybody else that they're wrong and somebody should fix this, but to actually start fixing stuff. Just like small change, and talk to people and be nice about it and really, really try to lead by example. I'm not saying that they aren't doing that. I just feel like if we go into confrontation too often, we're always going to miss the goal. Because confrontation never leads. We talked about this before, right? It's never about the thing. It's about the power struggle. So when you start going into the power struggle, you will be arguing on a meta level that has nothing to do with the thing itself. So if you really care about the thing, start to change your life first and foremost, so that thing can actually be fine. And then you got something that you can lead by example, and you can show people how it's done. And you can actually make it happen. You make it happen first small, and then it gets to be bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And it's all about influence. It's about learning how to communicate. Not just do that, but also how to influence others to do that. Instead of reverting to childlike behavior and going like, Mommy, Daddy, please fix the issue. Okay, I'm being a little harsh here. However, this is the bridge to the next part, where I want to talk about how broken people create a broken world. Because right now I took like the climate activists as an example. However, we have talked about trauma. We have talked about the things that happened to us during our childhood, during our adolescence, when we were babies, when we were really, really reliant on others, right? And we have no choice. So these things happen to us, we split them off, and we create the so-called survival mechanisms. Short repetition, what's a survival mechanism? It is when I take that traumatic experience, I cannot handle it, I cannot feel it, so I package it off and store it away somewhere where it's never to be found. So I've stored it away, and now I have created a coping mechanism. I have created a survival mechanism that is surviving that trauma. So I adapt my behavior so that trauma never happens again, right? I have this small switch inside of my head or my body go, okay, this was really, really bad. What happened there? Let's make sure it never happens again. And if you've heard about the law of attraction, right, the manifestation, if you always try to prevent something, what's going to happen? Well, exactly. That thing that you wanted to prevent is going to happen exactly the way you wanted it not to happen. So what's the solution? What's going on there? The solution is obvious. Go and do your trauma work. Go and work at your own trauma so you are not a slave of your survival mechanisms, right? But the really interesting thing is to look at these survival mechanisms and to look at how it actually creates the problems that we have as society. I've talked before, right? It's the externalizing, the projection. Oh, the problem is outside. I have a bad feeling, but the problem is outside. Please, somebody fix it, right? Going into that childlike behavior. Well, that is exactly also what a survival mechanism would do. Let's say as a kid, we had a traumatic experience, it overloaded our system. We are really reliant on our parents to just fix it for us. And whenever we get into the situation again, we feel completely helpless. So what I said before, people start taking responsibility for yourself. It's not that easy. And it's not that easy because of all that trauma that we have from the past. Now, am I saying that's a great excuse? Because I see this happen a lot, especially with the younger generations. They're like, oh, I'm so traumatized, so I just don't feel like doing this. It's making me feel bad. I'm getting these weird feelings, It's not about that. I mean, there is trauma that has to be taken really seriously. It's not a joke. And it's also not a good joke to say that you're traumatized or that you have certain issues, because first of all, we have certain degrees of severity of trauma and how deep it goes and so on. But just like not feeling like doing something isn't really going to classify as actually being really traumatic, right? So there is a little bit of effort required of you, and not to just be a victim all the time. Here's me saying the word victim, because what's going on? There's a lot of victimization going on after surviving trauma. People blaming others and feeling like a victim. And then they create survival mechanisms around being a victim. So going like, I am powerless. There's nothing I can do. I feel like this is too much for me. Going into escapism, or even protecting the ones that are kind of the perpetrators and doing the bad stuff. And they go like, well, it's not so bad. Maybe you should look at their side. So that's kind of one thing that you want to be looking at. And the other thing that you want to be looking at is people who are actually starting to do bad stuff, like the perpetrators themselves. Everybody who is becoming a perpetrator, not just by committing these acts, are they traumatizing other people? They're first of all traumatizing also themselves, again and again and again and again. And they would never do that in the first place if they also weren't traumatized before that. So now as it's unfolding, broken people create a broken world. Every side is actually traumatized. And that's the reason why we can't have discussions or arguments around the thing, like climate change, but it's always on this meta level of who is right, who is wrong, who has more control, who has more power, who is to blame, right? There's a lot of blame going around. And if you look at it, you can just map it out as a victim and perpetrator mentality. And so you have victims blaming the other ones that are the perpetrators, but they are turning it back around on them, saying, well, we are actually the victims of you guys because you're doing such and such and such, so you are actually the perpetrators. And it goes on and on and on, right? And actually, what I've always seen, people who are able to do trauma work, they kind of get to escape that spiral. And it's not just escaping the spiral and then like seeing the matrix and everything is different, because it is that. But it is even more than just that. It completely changes the way you feel, the way you think, and the way you act in the world. Completely changes it. Like there is not one more thing that is remotely interesting in these discussions. Who is to blame, where it is going, who represents the mommy figure, who represents the daddy figure, who is supposed to protect, who has been left unprotected, and so on. These are always just the same discussions over and over and over again. And you can track this kind of childlike behavior back and back and back. I mean, in fact, this is also something that we do in IOPT, like when you're working with resonance and when you're working with other people who are doing substitutions in constellation work, oftentimes the roles that they take on, you can ask them, like they have their own personalities, right? The roles. So you can ask, how old are you in this moment right now? Like, what age do you feel like? And usually in trauma work, you will see people going back, really into adolescence, into childhood, into like toddlers, babies states. So it goes really far back. And then you can also see like how they are acting, how they are moving in that constellation. And then you go like, yeah, of course, this behavior matches that age, because that is how developed they are at this point. Now, if you look at the world and the people who have a say and the people who, I don't know, who are amassing vast fortunes or people who are in office or whatever, like you can see also a very different set of behaviors. And it very well may be that they have different parts of them stuck in different ages. And then when you like see a scandal or something happening that nobody expected, right? They expect them to be responsible, they expect them to be grown up and so on. And every so often you will see something that is not responsible, that is not grown up. So guess what? It's their inner child, inner wounded child, coming out to play. But it's not playing, it's usually demanding, it's arguing, it's being destructive, it's being uncooperative, right? And so you see all these kind of win-lose or lose-lose behavior that's not really developed. And the reason it's coming up is because they have never really looked at their inner wounds, the trauma that has been happening to them. So it's not just that broken people create a broken world. They are actually broken, so they act in a broken way, which kind of interacts with the world and influences every decision that is made by everyone on this planet. And that creates a pretty shitty experience, right? I mean, the experience can be wonderful. It can be wonderful. It can be. But in most cases, most people that I talk to, most people that I see on the street, most people that I read about in the news, most people, like wherever I look, they are not happy people. There's this one wonderful quote by Tolstoy, and I repeat this one over and over and over again, so you've probably heard me say it. It's from Anna Karenina, the novel. And it's the first sentence, like how he starts the novel. He goes like, every unhappy family is unhappy in their own way, and every happy family is alike. Right? So you have like the luck or happiness or just a fulfilled life. Everybody who's living a fulfilled life or just being happy, they have traits that are common. They're so similar. But whoever is unhappy, there's so many things that can go wrong, right? So many different types of trauma and so many different complications of these survival mechanisms that are trying to go around the trauma and around everything just to form like a parallel reality for them, that the thing that they feared the most never happens again. That's a harsh reality to face, but it is one that is very, very real, and in fact, for most people, just everyday life. So what we've talked about, right? We've talked about we move through the world, and then we always are losing ourselves in these meta levels where we're not even talking about the thing that we want to talk about. We are talking about some social weird norms like right or wrong, who's to blame, victim, perpetrator, and so on. And the reason why this is happening is because of very, very early wounds that we have and that we never have ever looked at, right? If we would have looked at these wounds, we kind of would have changed our life as to resolving all these survival mechanisms that are trying to prevent the situation from happening, and kind of go into this fulfilled happy state and be alike like all the other fulfilled happy people. So it's very easy to spot somebody that's fulfilled and happy. Or it's also very easy to spot somebody who isn't, because they're just not looking that way, right? So, in fact, most people carry their trauma around, and they create these elaborate survival mechanisms of how to not have this ever happen again. And then they become like hardened, they become brittle, they become like really, really angry sometimes at the world, or they become very manipulative, or they seek power, they seek wealth in order to fill like the void that they feel inside, and so on. So there's so many different scenarios how this can play out. So many different ones. And again, why we want to change that, why we want to escape that mechanism, is because it's just not going to go to a good place. We see the world getting worse and worse and worse because it is re-traumatizing itself again and again and again and again. And if we are able to just like take a few steps back, breathe through, and just say, I don't want to be part of this, whatever is going on anymore, and I'm going to start with taking responsibility. I'm going to be self-reliant, and I'm going to take care of my own baggage and not expect others to fix it for me. Because there is, if you want it or not, there is a direct responsibility of your behavior to what's going on outside. Right? In our democratic world, we often go like, well, yeah, I do have a voice, but does my voice really matter? Do I matter? Can I change the course of things? And in fact, you can. You really, really can. Because it's a very, very small change. And can you just picture this? Creating this very, very small change for yourself, and just let's say your life gets to be 10% better, or 20%, or 50% better, or even, I don't know, 100, 200% better. You just start taking responsibility for yourself. And you do that and you get to live a happy life. It's not just egoistical to do that. Because why? People around you are going to notice. And they're going to say, hey, this person is being really, really unconventionally happier. Like, they weren't this way like 2 years ago. What's going on? And you get to talk to them, and you get to influence them, and maybe that inspires them to take action as well. So they take action, take responsibility, take some kind of self-reliance into their own life, and they make their lives better. They get to have better quality of life. And they improve like 10, 20, 50%, I don't know. And then the people around them notice that. And it goes on. So even as a single person, you have a lot of possibility to change and to go for the better. By the way, not doing that is also a trauma survival mechanism. Going like, oh, everything is fucked anyway. Why should I bother? I don't care. I don't want to. That's hopelessness. That's like learned behavior that at one point in your life you wanted something so much and you just weren't able to get it. And instead of going and getting out and kind of being at the danger of experiencing this kind of disappointment again, that you want something and you want it so much, but you just can't get it, right? You don't want to experience that disappointment, so you go like, I don't really want to bother, I don't really care about that. It's not going to work anyway. The fable with the fox and the grapes, where the fox goes like, I think it was one of my favorite fables as a kid by Aesop. So the fox goes into the garden, and they're like these beautiful grapes hanging, and it just wants to get the grapes. So it tries running, jumping, climbing, and just can't reach these grapes. So in the end, the fox goes like, oh, they're sour anyway. And he just walks away. Don't walk away from yourself. Don't go like, well, it's too hard, it's too sour, because of some experiences that you have had before in life that may have disappointed you, may have taken away the edge that you had, like the fire that it's worth to live for something, to breathe for something, to, like have goals and be at the cause and not the effect, and not going like, well, I'm a victim and somebody should take care of that. There's no mommy and there's no daddy around to take care of you. You need to start taking care of yourself, right? That's the first step. And when looking at this, I'm going to say once more, broken people create a broken world. Then you understand, well, yeah, but I also create the world. So do I want to be broken? Or am I going to be the best that I can be? And allow myself to actually grow and to let go of all the things that have been holding me back. And all the bad stuff that has happened to me. Not stuff it away. I'm not talking about that kind of letting go. You know exactly what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about splitting off, putting it into your subconscious, be like, I'm not that kind of person. No, I'm talking about letting go, which is integrating, which is breathing into it, which is allowing yourself to see the truth of your own life. To experience what life has in store for you and to allow these experiences to happen so that you can be your authentic self and feel whatever it is that needs to be felt in your body, in your muscles, in your bones, in your being, with everything. There's so many feelings that we've just stuffed down, and so many thoughts that we don't allow ourselves to think because it could hurt, right? It could be disappointing. It could be like that other time, right? So here's me to inspire you. Do take the step. Do go the way. It is probably going to hurt once or twice, but it's absolutely worth it. It is absolutely worth it, because that is what life is about. It's not just protection, protection, protection. It's sunny days and then rainy days and warm days and cold days. And it's all just part of life. So, are you ready to say yes to life? And I hear that small voice inside of your head going, yes, I am ready. So let's give power to that voice. Let's give it all the support it needs. Let's give it energy. Let's give it space. Let's reconnect with it. Let's reconnect with life, with everything it has to offer. And just enjoy this process. It's been wonderful talking to you today. I really do hope that you took away this strong message of what life is actually about. Make sure to follow, to subscribe, to like, and to even drop me a comment what you felt about this, what you thought about this. I'm really, really curious, and I'm really looking forward to meeting you one day in a Zoom session, in person, whatever it is. I love working with people. I love exchanging ideas. And if you have the time, do drop me some lines. I'm looking forward to those. Having said that, I do hope that you have an amazing week, and I will see you in the next episode. Take care.